Have you ever been treated like the unpaid maid by your own family? I'm Lily Anderson, 31 years old, living in Boston. For years, every holiday met me stuck in the kitchen with cracked hands, while my sister Sophia laughed with guests praised as the pride. They said I had no career, better stay home. I stayed silent. But silence never meant weakness. The night before Christmas Eve, my mother, Patricia, ordered, "Come back to New Jersey and cook for 30 VIP guests." On the list was Alexander Reed, CEO of Summit Hospitality. And me, I was packing to fly to Miami to close a $3.5 million deal for the company I built, Nova Events. No one in my family knew. Not because I hid it, because they never asked. I chose what they never expected. I didn't go home. And just 48 hours later, inside a glass-walled boardroom, Alexander walked in, looked straight at me, smiled, so glad to finally meet the CEO of Nova Events. The whole room stood. And in New Jersey, pizza served on silver plates. Have you ever been dismissed just because they thought you were nothing? Comment where you're watching from and what injustice you've endured. If this story hits you, make sure to follow, because right now we'll peel back every fake layer until justice is served piping hot. I was born and raised in a wealthy family in the suburbs of New Jersey. Our 3-story white house was often called the Anderson Mansion by people in the neighborhood. Every Christmas, the entire house sparkled with decorations. Lights strung across the fences, a towering tree reaching the ceiling, gift boxes neatly stacked beneath it. From the outside, everyone thought we were a happy model family, lacking nothing. But the truth was far from that glittering image. Since I was 16, every holiday, every family gathering automatically became my duty. I was the one shopping, I was the one in the kitchen, I was the one responsible for every dish on the table. From roast turkey, cranberry sauce, to elaborate desserts. While my peers wore pretty dresses and went out to celebrate, I spent the entire day in the kitchen, hands greasy, back aching from standing for hours. My younger sister, Sophia, was the complete opposite. She never had to lift a finger. Whenever there was a party at home, all she needed to do was slip into a glamorous dress, sit in the living room, and laugh with the guests. My mother, Patricia, would always beam with pride. "This is Sophia, my youngest daughter, an excellent PR professional. She's my pride and joy." Her voice sweet, full of arrogance. But when someone asked about me, she brushed it off. "Oh, she's here too, helping out in the kitchen." Just one short sentence, yet enough to make me feel diminished, turned into a shadow inside my own house. It repeated year after year until I felt like the family had assigned roles for each of us. Sophia was the shining star, while I was the unpaid help. I still remember Sophia's 20th birthday. My parents hired a live band, ordered a multi-tiered cake. They invited nearly all of their elite friends. I spent 12 hours in the kitchen, preparing everything from appetizers to the main course. When guests asked about my career, my mother chuckled. "She's not doing anything stable yet, but at least she can cook." That line cut like a knife. I was never useless. They just never acknowledged me. After graduating college, I chose my own path. I refused to rely on the family's wealth or name. I started small, birthdays, weddings for a few dozen guests in Boston. I worked day and night, saving every dollar. At times I thought I couldn't survive, but stubbornness kept me going. Step by step, I built Nova Events. 6 years later, my company had 60 full-time employees, with offices in Boston, New York, Philadelphia, and Miami. We handled hundreds of events each year. Some months, contracts reached hundreds of thousands of dollars. Nova Events gradually became a recognized name in the luxury event industry. Thanks to that, I bought a spacious condo in downtown Boston, had my own car, and a bank account solid enough that money was no longer a worry. Yet the Anderson family had no idea. Not because I kept it secret, but because they never cared. They never asked what I did, never wondered how I could afford to live in Boston. They simply assumed I was drifting along, living off the small savings left by my grandmother. In their eyes, I was always the unemployed daughter, the one who only knew how to cook. My father, Thomas, was always silent. I never knew what he truly thought. Sometimes I caught him watching me, as if he wanted to say something. But then he would look away, letting my mother continue her comparisons, her dismissals. That silence often hurt more than words. It made me feel as though even my own father didn't have the courage to admit I had value. I once tried to share a little about my work. I told them I had just landed a major conference contract. My mother glanced at me, then immediately turned to brag about Sophia. She just signed a PR deal for a cosmetic brand. So proud of her. My words disappeared into the noisy living room, unnoticed. I understood that in that house, my success would never have a place. So I chose silence. I didn't need their praise. I knew exactly what I was building. I knew where my worth lay. And deep down, I believed one day, the truth would reveal itself. And when that day came, all the arrogance, all the condescending looks they had thrown at me, would come back with a price. On December 23rd, I was sitting in my Boston apartment, packing my suitcase for the trip to Miami. On my desk lay a $3.5 million contract with Summit Hospitality, tucked neatly in a leather folder. Just one signature away, Nova Events would reach a whole new level. My heart raced, both nervous and excited. 6 years of hard work, all about to pay off. My phone buzzed. The screen lit up with 2 familiar letters. "Lam." I sighed. Before even answering, I already knew her tone. And of course I was right. "Lily, come home tomorrow. Sophia is hosting a Christmas Eve party for 30 important guests. You'll be cooking everything." My mother, Patricia, spoke like it was a command. No greeting, no concern. I bit my lip. "Mom, I'm busy tomorrow. I can't come back." "Busy with what? Don't make things up. These are major business people, lawyers, investors. This is Sophia's chance to expand her network. Do you know who's coming? Alexander Reed, CEO of Summit Hospitality. That man could change your sister's career. You better do it right. Do you understand?" I froze for a few seconds. Alexander Reed. The very name I had been waiting 2 years for. He was the head of the hotel empire I was about to sign with. How ironic. My mother thought he was coming to boost Sophia's future, when in reality, he was about to partner with me. The daughter she believed was unemployed. My mother continued, "I'll send you the menu. 12 main courses, 8 sides, wine pairings. Don't embarrass this family. You know, Sophia has a career, and you?" She trailed off, but I knew that line all too well. In her eyes, I was always the useless one. My phone kept buzzing. A text from Sophia. "Don't ruin this for me. Alexander Reed will be there. If you screw it up, I'll never forgive you." I stared at the screen and let out a bitter laugh. They had no idea I was the one with a business meeting scheduled with Alexander in Miami on the 26th. The contract Summit was about to sign with me was worth far more than any PR opportunity Sophia was chasing. I picked up the plane ticket on my desk. Boston to Miami, 9 a.m., December 24th. My suitcase already packed. I couldn't miss it. Behind that contract were 60 employees counting on me, an entire company I had built with my own hands, my career, my life. I pressed the phone to my ear, took a deep breath. "Mom, I can't come home. I have important business." "What business could be more important than family? You're just messing around in Boston with meaningless stuff. Listen to me. Sophia needs you. This is when you sacrifice for your sister. Don't be selfish." My head rang. Sacrifice for my sister. For 15 years, hadn't I sacrificed enough? Every holiday, I stood in the kitchen until my body ached. Every time friends invited me out, I lied and said I was busy. Every moment I could have had for myself, I gave up for the family. And in return, what did I get? Only looks of disdain, mocking words, and the endless role of the unpaid maid. I clenched my fist. "I can't. I have a flight tomorrow morning. I'm sorry." On the other end, my mother nearly shouted, "If you dare walk away, don't ever come back. Don't expect us to consider you family anymore." That line should have made me tremble, like it always had before. But strangely, my heart felt calm. I was used to her threats. She always won because I gave in. But not this time. I was no longer the 16-year-old girl quietly stuck in the kitchen. I was the CEO of Nova Events. I had a team behind me. I had a life of my own that didn't need anyone's permission. I looked at the contract on my desk, at the plane ticket in my hand, and whispered, "Then consider this my choice." I hung up. Sophia's texts kept pouring in. "You're insane. You'll ruin everything. You'll regret this." I didn't respond. I shut off my phone, leaned back in my chair, and felt a wave of freedom surge through my chest. That night, December 23rd, for the first time in 15 years, I chose not to obey their unreasonable commands. I chose my career. I chose myself. And that choice was the turning point that changed everything. While I was on the plane heading to Miami, back in New Jersey, everything was already falling apart. I wasn't at the Anderson mansion that night, but I later learned every detail from texts, calls, and even the chatter that spread all over social media. And I swear, once you hear it, you'll understand why I don't regret my decision for a single second. On the afternoon of the 24th, guests started to arrive. Our house was decorated just like every other year, grand from the front gates all the way to the living room. The crystal chandelier glowed brilliantly. The long dining table was draped in a pristine white cloth, and polished silverware was lined up neatly. But one thing was missing: the food. The kitchen was spotless, pots, pans, dishes, all clean as if they hadn't been touched. My mother, Patricia, paced back and forth, face flushed red, sweat breaking across her forehead. She had believed I would show up, just like always, bow my head, roll up my sleeves, and sacrifice for the family. But this time, the silent kitchen was the loudest reminder. I wasn't coming. The guests kept arriving, 30 in total, mostly business executives, lawyers, people from hospitality and real estate. And among them was Alexander Reed, CEO of Summit Hospitality. He entered with calm confidence, polite and composed, shaking hands with everyone. In his mind, he was probably expecting a grand dinner, the kind my mother had bragged about for weeks. But when the clock struck 7 p.m., the dining table held nothing more than a few cheap cheese plates and crackers Sophia had rushed to throw together as filler. No main dishes, no aroma of roasted turkey, no wine being uncorked course by course, nothing. Some guests started whispering. The once bustling atmosphere turned awkward. My mother frantically called every restaurant within miles, but on Christmas Eve, who was still open? Finally, after scrambling, she had no choice but to do the unthinkable. Order takeout pizza and fried chicken. Just picture it. Red pizza boxes and greasy paper bags carried into the grand dining room, laid across that spotless white tablecloth. Silver plates, crystal glasses, and polished flatware used to serve soggy pizza slices and greasy fried chicken. Guests looked at each other. Some chuckled, others frowned in disbelief. And Alexander Reed? He stayed quiet, only furrowing his brow, but his disappointment was unmistakable. Sophia tried desperately to salvage the night. She floated around the room, forcing a smile, introducing herself to everyone. "I'm Sophia Anderson. I work in PR. I'd love the chance to collaborate with you." But no one was paying attention. And when one guest asked, "Where's the chef? Who's responsible for this dinner?" my mother snapped, her voice sharp with anger. "My eldest daughter, Lily. She's irresponsible, unemployed, and abandoned us at the last minute. Shameful." I knew she said it, because my phone lit up later with texts from acquaintances. "Lily, what happened? Why is your mom saying you ran away?" Some even mocked me. "Pizza on silver plates? That's a classic. Tell me, wouldn't you be furious?" They labeled me useless right in front of people I had worked with, people I was about to work with. They branded me unemployed while I was on my way to sign the biggest contract of my career. Sophia still didn't give up. As guests picked up pizza, she slid into a chair next to Alexander Reed, trying to pitch her PR company. "Mr. Reed, I have plenty of fresh ideas. If Summit Hospitality ever needs a new branding campaign, I'd love to help." But Alexander only nodded politely. He didn't stay long. From what I later heard, he left barely half an hour after the food arrived. And before walking out the door, he glanced around the room one last time, his expression cold, unreadable. That night, the party ended far earlier than usual. No applause, no praise, only awkward silence. And most importantly, the Anderson family's reputation, the very thing my mother prized most, collapsed under the weight of a few pizza boxes. What made it both sad and absurd was this. They all blamed me. My mother's text poured in. "You disgraced us. You ruined your sister's career. You're worthless." Sophia screamed into the phone. "I lost my chance. If you had just come back and cooked, none of this would have happened." But I knew the truth. Even if I had been there, they wouldn't have introduced me for who I was. I would have been stuck in the kitchen, exhausted, while Sophia shined in the spotlight. And Alexander Reed? He would have eaten a dinner prepared by me without ever knowing I was the CEO of Nova Events. Thinking of that, I smiled in my Miami hotel room. Letting them taste failure, letting them feel humiliated in front of the very people they wanted to impress. That was perhaps the sweetest appetizer to my revenge plan, one I hadn't even lifted a finger to serve. The next morning, as soon as I landed in Miami, My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. When I turned it on, dozens of messages flooded in, from old friends, some of my dad's former colleagues, even acquaintances back in New Jersey. Every single one of them sent me the same photo. Pizza boxes and fried chicken neatly placed on the long white tablecloth, sparkling crystal glasses right beside them. The caption under the picture read, "The Anderson Christmas Dinner, Pizza on Silver." In just one night, that image spread across LinkedIn, then quickly got screenshotted and plastered on Facebook and Twitter. People mocked, people laughed. The so-called elite Anderson family had suddenly become a joke. My mother, Patricia, was nearly losing her mind. She texted nonstop, all in capital letters, "You have ruined us. You will pay. You've been useless your entire life." Sophia wasn't any better. "Do you know how long I prepared to impress Alexander Reed? All of it is gone now. You're nothing but a destroyer." I read everything, but I didn't respond. I let them rage because I knew, for the first time in their lives, they were forced to face the consequences without me in the kitchen holding everything together. While my family screamed in chaos, I stepped into a different world, one where my work was truly respected. That afternoon, I had a casual meal with a few partners before the official meeting with Summit Hospitality. We chose an upscale seafood restaurant by the ocean. I sat there, in a perfectly tailored suit, Florida sunlight pouring through the windows, feeling completely confident. Alexander Reed was there, along with several members of his executive board. I had corresponded with them over email, but this was our first time meeting in person. Alexander shook my hand, his eyes sharp, yet warm. We sat down, ordered white wine, and started our conversation. Everything was going smoothly until Alexander set his glass down, chuckled lightly, and said, "You won't believe what I went through last night in New Jersey. One of the worst Christmas dinners I've ever attended." I froze for half a beat. He was talking about my family's house. Alexander continued, his tone a mix of amusement and frustration. "The hosts invited about 30 guests, myself included. They promised a grand evening, said their eldest daughter was preparing everything. But when we arrived, nothing. The kitchen was empty. In the end, they had to order takeout pizza and fried chicken, served on their expensive crystal sets. I actually ate pizza off silver plates. Can you imagine?" The whole table laughed while I clenched my emotions tight. My heart pounded, but I kept my face calm, as though I was just another distant listener. Alexander took another sip of wine and shook his head. The worst part wasn't even the food. It was how they spoke about their own daughter. The mother kept complaining that the eldest was unemployed, irresponsible, and abandoned them at the last minute. She said it in front of every guest. I've never seen someone degrade their own child like that. Honestly, it was one of the most unprofessional, unpleasant nights I've ever experienced. In that moment, I felt torn in two. One half of me wanted to stand up and declare, "The woman you're talking about is my mother, and that unemployed daughter is me, the CEO of Nova Events." But the other half whispered, "Not yet. Let time reveal it. Wait for the perfect moment." I smiled faintly, pretending to be merely curious. "That does sound terrible. Did you stay long?" Alexander shook his head. "No, I left after about 30 minutes. A CEO can't waste time in a place like that." But honestly, it made me think. Sometimes people get so busy showing off that they forget the one thing that matters: authenticity. The others nodded in agreement, while I took a deep breath to steady my heartbeat. In my mind, images flashed. My mother's red face over the pizza table, Sophia's forced smile, guests whispering in disappointment. And now, Alexander, the biggest business partner of my career, had witnessed it all. Thankfully, he had no idea I was connected to it. That was the midpoint of the story. Half the truth had already been revealed. Alexander knew about the disastrous dinner, knew about the unemployed daughter his hosts had shamed, but he didn't yet know that daughter was me, the woman he was about to sign a $3.5 million contract with. I sat there, lifted my glass of wine, lips still smiling, but inside my heart was roaring. I knew, if I could just hold my silence a little longer, if I could stay patient, the moment of revelation would come. And when it did, no one would ever dare call me useless again. After the meal with Alexander Reed and the Summit team, I returned to my Miami hotel with my heart still pounding. I had sat there, listening to him recount the scene of pizza laid out on silver plates, hearing him mention the unemployed daughter with a mix of pity and annoyance. And I, the very person he was talking about, sat quietly, smiling as if it had nothing to do with me. Unbelievable. Right? My whole life, I had been dismissed, buried under the role of the family servant. And now, right in front of me, was the chance to turn everything upside down. But I chose silence. Because I understood. Sometimes, the sweetest revenge doesn't come from shouting, and it doesn't come from exposing the truth too soon. It comes from waiting for the perfect moment. That night, I sat by the window on the 20th floor, watching Miami's lights shimmer across the ocean. In my mind, every piece of the plan lined up like chess moves. And the first move, I didn't even have to make myself. I had an ally stronger than any defense. The media. A few weeks earlier, a journalist from Business Elite magazine had contacted me. They wanted to do a special issue on entrepreneurs under 35 who had built their own empires. I had agreed to the interview. We talked for 3 hours about everything. How I started with just a few $1,000s in savings, the failures, the sleepless nights, and the truth that I built Nova Events entirely without any support from my family. Just yesterday, right before I left for the airport, the editor emailed me. "Lily, good news. We've decided to feature your story as the cover. The issue comes out December 27th, right after Christmas. The headline we've chosen, From Invisible to $1 Million CEO." When I read those words, I shivered. Not only from pride, but because I knew this was the decisive piece on the board. I imagined it clearly. My mother, Patricia, the same woman who stood before 30 guests last night calling me unemployed, useless, would open Business Elite and see my face on the cover, bold letters across the page. Sophia, who believed only she deserved to be called successful, would see me, her older sister she had belittled, celebrated nationwide. And my father, Thomas, would no longer be able to sit in silence. I knew one thing for certain. That magazine would hit them exactly where it hurt. Because in my family, reputation mattered more than anything. But my plan wasn't just to give them a media shock. I wanted the truth laid bare in a way no one could deny. I didn't want my mother later claiming that the press exaggerated or that Sophia was the real pride. I wanted living proof, undeniable evidence. And that opportunity would come the very next day, in Summit Hospitality's boardroom, when I would stand before Alexander Reed and the entire executive team to present my project. Just picture it. Alexander, the same man who had listened to my mother trash me in front of dozens of guests, would learn that the unemployed daughter was actually the very partner he was about to sign a multi-million-dollar deal with. I wouldn't need to say much. The truth itself would do the work. That was the second lever of my plan. The impossible coincidence between the pizza disaster in New Jersey and the contract signing in Miami. And there was one more thing I had kept close. In my suitcase, besides the contract and presentation materials, I carried a special business card. The front read, "Lily Anderson, CEO and founder, Nova Events." On the back, a quote I had chosen carefully, "Success doesn't need permission." I wanted, at the right moment, for my mother and Sophia to see that card and finally understand I had never needed their approval. Thinking about all of this, I felt a strange calm. In the past, whenever my mother threatened, "If you don't listen, don't come home," I used to tremble. I feared being cast out, feared being alone, but not anymore. I had a company, I had employees who trusted me, I had massive contracts, I had a life I built myself. I no longer needed permission, and I certainly didn't need pity. So what was my revenge plan? Not to scream in their faces, not to prove myself through arguments, but to let them watch me rise to the top, while they sat there choking on their own humiliation. On the night of the 24th in my hotel room, I opened my laptop. My inbox flashed with a new email from the Business Elite editor. "We'd love to include a photo of you signing the Summit deal if possible. It would make the story perfect." I smiled. Yes, I would have that photo. And it would be the final proof, shattering every insult my family had ever thrown at me. I typed back, "Give me 48 hours. I'll send you a picture no one will ever forget." Sitting in the quiet room, I closed my eyes. I imagined my mother frantically calling acquaintances, trying to explain. Sophia seething with rage over her humiliation. And my father, as always, sitting in silence. But in just a few days, when the magazine hit the stands, When LinkedIn filled with photos of me signing a multi-million-dollar contract, they would no longer be able to deny anything. I didn't need to shout. I've made it. All I needed was to stay silent, wait for the moment, and that moment was closer than ever. On December 26th, I woke up before dawn. From my Miami hotel window, the skyline glowed with the first light of day, waves crashing in steady rhythm as if reminding me, today was destiny. I stood before the mirror, adjusting the navy blue suit I had chosen carefully, my hair pinned neatly, makeup subtle but strong. I was no longer the girl bent over a kitchen stove until her back ached. I was Lily Anderson, CEO of Nova Events, and I was about to walk into the most important boardroom of my life. Summit Hospitality's boardroom sat on the top floor of a massive glass tower. As I stepped inside, my heart pounded, but my stride was steady. In front of me sat the senior leadership team, Alexander Reed in the center, flanked by the CFO, COO, and the company's lead counsel. We began the presentation. I spoke about Nova Events, about how we crafted luxury events with exclusive experiences. I laid out concrete numbers. Over 500 events in the past year, a 92% client return rate, annual revenue growth of 35%. Each slide on the LED screen gleamed with precision. Each word carried the weight of 6 years of relentless effort. Alexander listened closely, occasionally nodding. In his eyes, I saw not only interest, but also something else. Curiosity, as if he was piecing together a puzzle still missing one final piece. Everything was running smoothly until his assistant walked in, handing him an iPad. Alexander glanced at the screen, his brows lifting suddenly. He looked at me, his expression shifting from surprise to recognition. He raised the iPad. On it was a photo from the disastrous Christmas dinner 2 nights earlier. My mother, Patricia, her face flushed red, standing beside pizza boxes laid across a long white tablecloth. And behind her, on the wall, hung last year's family portrait. In it, Sophia stood front and center, my parents on each side, while I lingered at the edge like an afterthought. Alexander stared at me. "Lily Anderson," he said slowly. "Is this your family?" The room fell silent. I knew this moment would come. I no longer avoided it. I lifted my chin, looked him straight in the eye, and nodded. Yes, Patricia is my mother. Sophia is my younger sister. For a few seconds, no one breathed. Then Alexander burst into laughter, a booming, genuine laugh that made the other executives exchange startled looks. He set the iPad down and pointed at me. Unbelievable. The very person they called unemployed, useless, is the CEO I've been chasing for 2 years. I only smiled. My heart pounded, but satisfaction flooded me. Alexander stood, walked over, and shook my hand again, this time firmly, with unmistakable respect. He turned to his leadership team. "Do you see this? This is living proof never to judge a person by someone else's words. She was torn down by her own family, and yet she runs the most impressive event I've ever seen." The CFO chuckled, the COO nodded, the attorney scribbled notes. I felt the atmosphere in the room shift, skepticism melting into admiration. Alexander returned to his seat, picked up his phone. "Excuse me, I need to make a call." He dialed right there at the table. I caught a glimpse of the screen. Margaret, Patricia Anderson. My heart nearly exploded. The call connected. My mother's voice came through, still sharp but trembling beneath the surface. "Alexander, I deeply apologize for the other night. It was all the fault of my irresponsible eldest daughter. I hope you understand." Alexander cut her off, voice firm. "Mrs. Anderson, I don't want to hear it. In fact, I only called to tell you this. Today, I just signed a $3.5 million contract with your daughter, Lily Anderson, CEO of Nova Events." Dead silence on the line. I could practically hear her gasping, then the sound of something clattering, as if she had dropped whatever was in her hands. Alexander glanced at me, raising his brows with meaning. Then her voice came back, shaky, broken. You just said what? That girl is a CEO?" Alexander's reply was sharp, each word slicing through her arrogance like a blade. "Not that girl. A brilliant woman who built a multi-million-dollar company without you knowing. The one you called unemployed is my strategic partner at Summit Hospitality." I closed my eyes, savoring that moment like the finest aged wine, sweet and burning all at once. Alexander ended the call, turned back to me with a radiant smile. "Now then, shall we sign this contract?" I picked up the pen and signed my name. The ink dried quickly, but the feeling of victory stayed hot in my veins. Applause erupted around the room, congratulations echoing from every corner. Almost immediately, my phone began to buzz nonstop. 20, 30, then 50 missed calls, all from my mother and Sophia. I set the phone face down without a glance. Instead, I raised the champagne glass Alexander had just poured. "I want to congratulate you, Lily," he said, voice rich with pride. "In all my years of business, I've rarely seen such a spectacular reversal of fate." I clinked my glass with his eyes shining. "Thank you, Alexander, but honestly I didn't do anything. I simply chose silence. The truth did the rest." Inside me, a voice whispered, "This is only the beginning. From this moment forward, the world and my family would never look at me the same way again." The news spread faster than I imagined. Right after the contract with Summit Hospitality was signed, Alexander Reed posted a photo of us on LinkedIn. The caption was short and sharp. "Proud to partner with Lily Anderson, CEO of Nova Events. A talented, resilient, and inspiring leader." Within hours, the post went viral. Everyone who knew the Anderson family was stunned. Just 2 days earlier, my mother had been bragging that Lily only knows how to cook, doesn't have a real job. And now the entire business world knew I not only had a job, but owned a multi-million-dollar company. Then came the wave of ridicule. Back in New Jersey, the same people who once admired my family now whispered and mocked. The image of pizza on silver plates was spliced side by side with the photo of me signing the contract circulating through community groups. While the Andersons served pizza to VIP guests, the daughter they dismissed just signed a multi-million-dollar deal with the CEO of Summit. People laughed, but this time, it didn't sting. This time it felt liberating. Sophia was the first to fall. One of her biggest clients, a cosmetics company she had flaunted endlessly, immediately canceled their PR contract. The reason? We no longer trust a brand associated with Sophia Anderson. Other clients followed. Within a month, her PR firm went from buzzing to barren. I heard she had to lay off nearly half her staff. My mother, Patricia, lost everything she cared about, her reputation. She had been a familiar face in several local charities, often leading fundraisers and flaunting our family's prestige. But after the pizza fiasco, and after the media highlighted that I had built Nova Events without a shred of family support, her credibility collapsed. The board restructured her right off their rosters. Her high society friends began to drift away. The woman who once held her head high in country clubs now bowed it low, avoiding the stares of ridicule. And my father, Thomas, finally spoke, but far too late. One evening, he called me, his voice weary. "Lily, I've known what you were doing for years. I saw the paperwork when Nova Events was registered, but I stayed quiet. I thought it was easier to let your mother believe whatever story she wanted to believe." I froze. So he had known. His silence wasn't ignorance, it was weakness. My reply came tight but steady. "Do you realize your silence hurt more than her insults? I fought alone. You could have been the first to acknowledge me, but you chose to say nothing." On the other end, he only sighed. I could hear his regret, but I refused to let myself soften too easily. Weeks later, my family asked to meet. We chose a small restaurant in Manhattan, not the mansion, not the private club. Neutral ground. When they walked in, I saw the change immediately. Sophia no longer carried arrogance. Her face was gaunt from sleepless nights. My mother, for the first time in years, wasn't draped in designer labels but wore a plain dress. My father looked older, grayer, as though time had caught up with him overnight. I set a single sheet of paper on the table. "These are the terms if we're to have any kind of new relationship." They stared at me, stunned. I calmly read them aloud. 1. Equal respect. I am no longer the family's maid. 2. A genuine apology, not a performance. 3. Family therapy. All of us, not just me. 4. Public acknowledgement of my success, at least to those who heard you tear me down. 5. If you can't do these things, we keep our distance. I have my own life now, and I don't need the family anymore. No one spoke for a long moment. Then my mother broke down. Tears streamed down her face as her voice shook. "Lily, I'm sorry. I was wrong. I was blind. I let my pride and my blind love for Sophia cloud everything. I was afraid to admit you were more capable than I ever imagined, so I made you into the servant, just to feel like I was still in control." Sophia bowed her head, muttering, "I was jealous. Every time I saw you succeed, I felt small. Instead of admitting it, I pushed you down to stand taller. I'm sorry." and my father finally lifted his eyes to meet mine. "I'm sorry too. I was a coward, but I want to make it right if you'll let me." I drew in a deep breath. I didn't cry. I had cried too many tears in the past. Now I only felt light but firm. "I'll give you a chance, but only if you do exactly what I've said. This isn't a negotiation. These are the only terms." They nodded, none of them daring to argue. And in that moment, for the first time in years, I felt the balance shift. I was no longer the girl kneeling in the kitchen. I was the one setting the rules. And they, the ones who once called me useless, were the ones forced to listen. 6 months after that meeting, my life was completely different. Nova Events not only held steady with the Summit hospitality contract, but also landed 3 more major projects thanks to Alexander's introductions. In just half a year, my company had doubled. 120 employees, new branches in Chicago and Los Angeles. Our New York office now sat inside a gleaming glass tower, with the Nova Events logo glowing over the corner of the street. I thought back to the early days, just me and a few partners in a tiny rented office. Now, walking into a grand boardroom, seeing a team of young, energetic staff call me boss, I finally felt the weight of the journey I had chosen, the journey that didn't require my family's permission. But perhaps the most surprising change wasn't in my career. It was in the Anderson family itself. My mother, Patricia, after losing all her footing in the charity circuit, finally agreed to therapy. At first, she resisted, but slowly she began to learn how to listen. In one session, she admitted, "I built an entire world around Sophia, and to do that, I had to make Lily invisible. I'm sorry." Her words came late, but at least, for once, they were honest. Sophia had transformed the most. After her PR firm collapsed, she was forced to face failure. At a dinner I hosted, she confessed, "You were always the one I wanted to catch up to, but instead of working harder, I chose to push you down. I regret it." She had gone back to school, this time to study event management. And for the first time, Sophia said she wanted to learn from me. My father, Thomas, changed the least, but his change was the most meaningful. He no longer stayed silent. At family gatherings, he would now ask about my work, really listen. Once he looked straight at me in front of relatives and said, "This is my daughter, Lily Anderson, CEO of Nova Events. I'm proud of her." Just one sentence, but for me, it was the apology he never knew how to put into words. We were still far from a perfect family. There were gaps, scars that lingered. But for the first time, I felt truly seen. No longer the unemployed daughter, no longer the maid in the kitchen, but a person worthy of respect. One evening, I hosted a small dinner at my new Boston apartment. Nova Events staff handled everything. I simply sat with my family, watching them enjoy a meal served by my own team. When my mother raised her glass, her voice trembled. "Thank you for giving us another chance, Lily." I smiled and replied softly, "Not giving, setting terms, and you chose to honor them." In that moment, I realized the sweetest revenge isn't making them suffer. It's forcing them to change, to learn to respect the very person they once trampled. And for the first time in my life, I was living fully in my own worth. Looking back on this journey, I realize one simple truth. Your value never requires anyone's permission. Not your family's, not society's, and certainly not from those who only see you through the lens of their own prejudice. For years, I was called a failure, treated like the maid in my own home. But the reality is, none of those labels had the power to decide who I would become. I chose to believe in myself. I chose to build my career with sweat and persistence, even without anyone standing behind me. And in the end, my success became the loudest rebuttal. I didn't need to scream that I was capable. All I had to do was keep climbing. And when the light of truth finally shone, every cruel word they once threw at me collapsed on its own. That is the lesson I want to share. Success is the sweetest revenge. You don't need to argue, you don't need to beg for recognition. All you have to do is keep moving forward, keep working, and trust in your real worth. And sooner or later, the world will see it. But what about you? Have you ever been belittled, treated like you had no value? Share your story in the comments. Who knows, your experience might be the exact inspiration someone else needs right now. And if you want to hear more revenge stories, where justice is served hot, where the underestimated rise to claim their true worth, make sure to hit subscribe. There are so many more stories waiting for you.